This video brought to you by the fine folks at T-Blocks. T-Blocks is an affordable subscription-based service that delivers custom t-shirts straight to your doorstep, with licensed art from Marvel, DC, Disney, Star Wars, Naruto, Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, and a whole lot more. You can support my channel today and get 10% off your first order with the special promo code GodzillaTBX. Go get some cool shirts, boys and girls.
It's Omaha Beach. Wounded knee. Works drift. The first day on the Somme. And only now. Pouring automatic fire into a human wall. Do I feel something like peace?
Also, I was Frankenstein one time. Thanks to the TV industry destroying power of good old Netflix, Punisher is now relevant in the mainstream again. And this time it's not for another terrible tragedy that everyone will send thoughts and prayers to. Thoughts and prayers go out to those in the television industry losing their jobs because of YouTube and Netflix, though. Hope none of you decide to take up vigilantism and attempt to wipe out all of the online entertainers, though, because that would like really slow down my production schedule pretty significantly. What was I talking about? Oh, the Punisher! Well, much like Deadpool and Spider-Man, I've spent a lot of time reading Punisher comics from all over the place, and he's probably in my top 5 favorite Marvel characters. So getting to review this one is a treat for a fan of the books. Special thanks to the wonderful Dane Amiot for requesting this review after donating to the highest Patreon tier. When I set up my Patreon, I put that last reward tier in there as a joke, but someone was actually generous and crazy enough to go for it, and he thankfully gave me an excuse to review this. Appreciate it, buddy. Hope I do you proud. Oh man, I hope no one finds that guy and makes a vlog about him.
Relevant.
Alright, let's get into it. Do you like violence? Do you like unrepentant mass disposal of criminals with a variety of long-range anti-living equipment? Then this game is for you. This game ranks up with some of the most brutal I've ever played. I often hear people compare it to Manhunt. From the developers of Saints Row, Volition put this together shortly after the Thomas Jane movie was released in 2004. It's actually pretty clear how much of the Saints Row series was based on this game mechanically, with a similar engine, very similar mechanics, and dare I say even some reused animations. Heck, I think I've seen some of these getting recycled all the way up until Saints Row 4. Got their money's worth, they built that to have some mileage. But unlike Saints Row, where you are the criminals, you're an exterminator for criminals. And instead of getting paid, you just do this out of the kindness of your cold black Frank Castle heart. Aw, this game doesn't have the seductive Marvel voice lady. The gameplay is pretty ahead of its time, I think. You can dive, roll, take cover, ask questions in a forceful manner, long distance unalive, extreme acupuncture, and cuddle with crime to avoid getting turned into Swiss cheese. If you can think of a thing Punisher does in the comics, you can pretty much do it here, plus a few extra things Punisher doesn't do in the comics. Like perform laser eye surgery, or feed animals in the forest. Do your best Isaac Clarke impression. Good God, we're one step away from being the manga Punisher.
So I enter a Japanese punishment on Google. Okay. Oh my holy God.
Some of these start to feel really mean-spirited and horrible. It's awesome! Although ESRB had to get all uncomfortable with it and made you lose points if you question a baddie and then do exactly what Punisher would do. Then they added this black and white filter and have the camera angles change so it's not quite as disturbing. If you get the PC version, all of these mini-sequences can be totally uncensored though, so you can appreciate the game how it's intended to be, you sicko. Aw, dude, the most expensive upgrade basically gives you Splatterhouse powers. I'm gonna save up for that one. You can also question guys that will occasionally give you PTSD flashbacks to Nam. That reminds me of another semi-related thing I've been meaning to talk about in a video. I hope you don't mind if I sidetrack for a moment. You know who else went to Nam? Spider-Man one time, but it was an Elseworlds story by James Sticco that was proposed to Marvel and they never made it. The art for this book looks amazing, and the premise is so out there. I highly recommend you take a look at some of the samples of the art and story that I put in the description. This is one of those weird premises like Spider-Man Noir that's so crazy it has to work. Can someone get on making a petition to get this restarted? I'll personally back the movement. I'd read the hell out of this story. If I was Charlie and I saw this guy out in the fields doing this to one of my tanks, I'd march my ass back into the bug-infested forest so hard. What was I talking about? Oh yeah. Why do all of these S.H.I.E.L.D. agents sound like various Deadpool voice actors?
Fury said you might be here.
Did he say to stay out of my way?
No? Let's move, men!
My orders are to hold here. There should be other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents ahead. Just be sure to shoot them, not us.
In general, I think the gameplay feels pretty smooth and responsive. You can hold 2 instruments of retribution at once, but it's more than enough to handle a room full of enemies. The early missions have you feeling so overpowered that you want to take on the whole world. And as we know, the Punisher is one of the 2 people who can do that. Jeez, dual-wielding boomsticks requires a ton of upper body strength. Frank's been doing his push-ups. After you've kind of flown through the first few levels, it starts to throw you a curveball with more opponents and less resources to work with. While most games would encourage you to get stealthy at this point, stealth isn't really a factor here. The sneak mechanic only really works when there's one guy around, and everywhere else is so populated that you're spotted the second you walk into a door. So what's the solution then? Well, then just, go louder and harder, I guess. Subtlety is for the weak. I think that's really the only complaint I have with this gameplay, is that stealth and subterfuge isn't really an option. It's always this really loud, persistent, hectic plethora of pain and yelling and swirlies. You don't often get a moment to just chill out and plan ahead, but that's one of the things I like most about Punisher. He's always planning ahead. He has the ability to play it cool and Agent 47 his way through a bad situation. I guess in a broader sense, some variety would have been nice in the gameplay. Plus the boss fights, with the exception of that transsexual cyborg in the striped shirt, are pretty... I think they kinda cheaped out on most of the bosses. They're pretty uncreative. It usually just boils down to a normal enemy type that's tougher than average, or one that can only be taken down via better marksmanship. Bullseye has a literal target on his head. This game does what it does extremely well, but that's all it does. There's very minimal exploration, and if you play it all in one sitting, I'm sure it would lose a lot of its steam before the end. Thankfully though, I played this over the course of a week or 2 with a lot of room in between, so the charm didn't wear off as quickly. I think that's the preferred method of enjoying it anyway. As for Punisher stuff for fans, it's got everything you could want. It's written by Garth Ennis, who did some of the legendarily good Punisher comics, and this game is chock full of references and Easter eggs for his books. I think the collectibles offer a lot of charm, with these goofy newspaper clippings with totally nonsensical visual aids that clearly they didn't think too hard about. Like, what is this one? That's a plane flying away from a giant ball of light after a mission where he sinks a freighter, but later in the game this exact visual happens and the newspaper clipping has a totally different comic panel on it. And what is this image supposed to even be? A less dumb example of collectibles paying tribute to the finisher is the game's Armory, where Frank has a fun fact or tidbit about every single piece of equipment.
Compact and convenient. It fires the same ammo as my .45 caliber semi-automatic, which saves even more space.
This reminds me a lot of this series from the 90s called Punisher, The Armory, which has several issues of nothing but Shane Bernthal's arsenal. Pages and pages of it with no story. Just him giving personal accounts and opinions on each item and his own uses for them. Kind of experimental for a comic, but if you're interested in learning more about that kind of stuff, I found it very educational. Not a bad read, and it's cool to see something so obscure getting an homage in this game. It's one of the more subtle, but definitely most appreciated pieces of fan service. And of course, what comic book game is complete without alternate costumes? There's plenty of cheats to dress up as various different Punishman's outfits. Though unfortunately, they're only available to wear during 2 missions and only on the PC version of the game. Ah, man, if this game came out a few years later, they could have used his Captain America costume variant. Or his other Captain America costume variant. Because there's 2 of them for some reason. It sucks that the console players can't get any costumes. I really like his classic look with the white gloves and boots. There's also Garth Ennis' trademark dark sense of humor, with a lot of horrible stuff interspersed with criminals being silly and incompetent. And ironically, I think he eased off of his usual dark and grim take on the Punisher himself. Punisher still feels like the character we all love, but he's allowed to crack a witty joke every now and then, and it really sells the tone of the story and makes you root for him.
You break it, you bought it. You've been fucked. I got his name. I'll just call him Chuck.
That's not to say Garth Ennis typically writes him as a hard ass all the time, but I feel like his funnier comments are spaced out and less frequent in stories like Punisher Max. And of course, Thomas Jane is a really great voice actor for Punisher. I may not like the movie he was in, but damn does his voice sound perfect. The story itself is fantastic, with just enough variety and intrigue to keep you going, and more villains than you can shake a traumatic backstory at. We start with Father of the Year finally getting taken in by the cops and being interrogated by two characters familiar to anyone who's read Marvel Knight's Punisher. I like this one. Soap is like the biggest loser in the Marvel Universe. He gets promoted to the police commissioner and then loses his job after a week. Plus, a whole bunch of other stuff. Also, he's the Punisher's informant and sort of bumbling sidekick. These two ask him how exactly everything got to this point, and he strolls back through memory lane and recalls his casual brushes with ultra-violence and extreme persuasion. Something I love about the Punisher is the way he treats military hardware so casually. An operation with dozens of casualties, property damage, and severe injuries is like a day at work. Like building a deck in the backyard. Like building a deck. We learned through the course of the game how no Family Guy got to this point, walking through crime bosses like Ma Nucci, Kingpin, General Kripkov, and he even fights some Yakuza. Of course, all these groups are being orchestrated against Pun Pun by an unseen figure whom I won't spoil, and the final mission has us going after that mystery villain. Without saying who it is, I kinda dislike the way the game tries to relate itself back to the 2004 movie's bad plot. Like, it turns a pretty cool comic villain into a recurring character from that film, and it makes them way less interesting. Also, the final boss is really clunky and just lacks that same enthusiasm and pacing of everything else in the game before it. It's kind of a slog to beat that one, and I think they could have done something less lame with what they had to work with.
He put a bomb on me! He said it'd blow if I messed with it!
Can't disarm this in time.
Someone's ripping me off!
How do I defuse your bombs?
Oh, like I haven't heard that before.
Anyway, there's a huge variety of locations for gameplay, and a really decent number of them are references or callback to awesome Discipliner storylines from Garth Ennis. Mostly his work on the 616 Punisher. I also love the amount of Marvel Universe cameos and references despite how much Garth despises them. He bit the bullet and let characters like Black Widow, Matt Murdock, Nick Fury, and Iron Man all have a place in this story. And it's much appreciated for the people who don't want to write 60-issue comics about how much they hate the concept of superheroes. The Boys is still good though.
Oh, hey, Black Widow. Do you want to star in an anime film with me?
I'm just mad that there wasn't a mission about destroying Wolverine's face and gonads and parking a steamroller on him while his screams become muffled and his limbs twitch.
Fatality.
He's okay, he'll walk it off, he's a tough guy. Now that I think about it, Russian accent Natasha and Papa Patchman look and sound a lot like how they do in Ultimate Alliance. Maybe this is canon to that game universe. And if that's true, then that would also mean... Hey! Frank Castle, how's it going, man? Got any plans for the weekend? I was gonna take my not-wife and 3 non-canon daughters out for a picnic in Central Park. I sure hope nothing bad happens while we're there. Wow, cool, that was pretty impressive. But anyway, you want to see if you could come along with us? Come on, it'd be fun. You could drop the whole
Stoic one-man army lives in a van and cuddles a shotgun at night.
act for an afternoon. If you want, you could even bring the wife and kid. Ooh. Okay, nice chatting with you. Have a nice evening. Bye. Alright, I played the entire game without getting a single upgrade, so I could do this. I hope it's worth the penny pinching. Oh. 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 Wait, that's it? Are you serious?
Sometimes I'd like to get my hands on God.
If you like the 12th episode of the Netflix show, this game feels like you're playing that. It's got all kinds of neat little tributes and nods for longtime Punisher fans, and it really feels like a lot of love for the character was baked into every headburst and window toss. I'm really lucky to have found a playable copy of it, and I think every fan of the character should add it to their collection. It's a rollicking good time. And you'll only feel slightly awful for enjoying it so much. Check it out. 15 out of 10, basically Call of Duty.